It's time once again for another thrilling episode of Markout Radio. For the next hour, sit back, pull the stick out of your ass, and enjoy. Be warned though, smarks and internet know-it-alls will be offended, annoyed, and generally pissed off at what's about to happen to your ear holes. You've been warned. Now, Markout Radio.
I will give in till I'm victorious, and I will defend.
Sometimes I amuse myself. I can't help myself. Goddamn. NXT TakeOver Brooklyn 2 was fantastic. And Bobby Roode's entrance is, well, I'm not going to say it. I'm not going to say it. Now, that being said, welcome back. It is Markout Radio. It is Sunday, August 28th, 2016. I'm Dave Tamrick with you. If you are in the chat room, you are going to be seeing my Phil Deadly t-shirt. Too damn deadly. Like it. Pairing it with my awesome DF hat. No, I didn't have it made myself. Shut up. Now, that being said, there's going to be, let's see. Well, listen, there's a lot of SummerSlam shit because last week I was covering SummerSlam as we were leading up to this shit. And, I don't want to disparage it by saying shit, but mediocre, I guess, for lack of a better term. It was very mediocre. And if you believe otherwise, then I'm sad for you. I am sad. I am sad for you if you thought it was fantastic. I'm sorry that your wrestling enjoyment has been this narrow. I guess if you've been a fan since John Cena's first title, it was awesome. I don't know. I don't know what to tell you people sometimes. It was mediocre, which is sad because it is one of their big shows of the year. And the thing that should actually make you cry a little bit inside is that the best matches of the night were in the pre-show and they were free. So that should make you cry a little on the inside that this is where we're at right now. I pay attention to what's going on online just because I'm kind of curious. I don't often interact with the wrestling fans online because frankly, a lot of you scare me. Now, that being said, I gotta stop fucking saying that. All right, knock it off. Now, the fact that JBL and David Otunga are good by comparison to other announced teams should tell you everything that you need to know about the truly gobsmackingly horrible announcing they have over on SmackDown. I mean, I'm used to hearing smarky or passive aggressive shit on commentary. I've watched enough indie wrestling to know and to hear indie wrestlers go off on each other or tell inside jokes. Like the big inside joke when Adam Cole came back was a lot of Chris Hero pointing out how fat he'd gotten and how he was rocking a dad bod now that he had a kid and stuff. And that's a very inside joke because if you don't know what Chris Hero looks like, he essentially, he basically has Kevin Owens' body, but insists on wearing wrestling tight, like trunks. So it was an inside joke, and that's fine. It's for that audience. It's wonderful. But for the WWE audience who are not smarky and are encouraged and indeed browbeaten into making sure that they're not smarky, it was just really painful to listen. First of all, it's really painful to listen to Michael Cole pass the announce over to David Otunga because you can hear the train spinning its wheels trying to find some traction. You know, like if you ever seen like one of those old steam locomotives and when they first kick on because they have so much fucking torque, you can hear the wheels kind of squealing as they're kind of building up some pressure. And the fucked up thing is David Otunga's an otherwise intelligent person. He's got an Ivy League education, and that's not kayfabe. He's got an Ivy League education. He's an intelligent person, but I think the WWE kind of assumed that because he has education and because he's reasonably good looking, he's got a good physique, that somehow would translate into being a good play-by-play guy. Let me tell you something. PWG has a masked announce guy. And he's a little bit smarky, and he's a wise ass, and he cuts promos on everybody. Does not look like he was or ever would be a wrestler, but he is fantastic. And when I compare what happens in the indies to these guys that get paid, like the announce team don't get paid a lot of money. I'll let cat out of the bag. When I did some announcing, I got $40. And I was not great either, but I'm not at the WWE, and I'm not under the auspices of Triple H and their creative team and all this other shit to give me pointers and stuff. Then David Otunga has been doing play-by-play off and on for the past 3 years. How he remains employed is, oh my God, so fucking horrible, and he's so bad that JBL talks over him even more than he talks over Michael Cole. Like, at least when I'll give JBL a pass. At least when he talks over Michael Cole, he's vainly attempting in a lot of ways. He's vainly attempting to be entertaining and interesting, I guess, for lack of a better term. But Michael Cole throws to David Otunga because David Otunga doesn't know how to speak for himself, apparently. He's so educated and he's so well-spoken that, of course, he knows exactly how to speak on a microphone. So when Michael Cole would throw to him, it was so painful. He'd go, David Otunga, what do you think about this? Or, you were a wrestler. What do you think about that? Knowing full well that JBL was also a wrestler, and it was so fucking painful. And he is possibly the most horrible play-by-play guy that the WWE has. And I understand a lot of people don't really like Mauro Ranallo, and I understand why. I mean, I get it. The Zoo Crew delivery is not everyone's cup of tea, and I understand that the way that he speaks is not. It's very, very 1980s wrestling, very much a mark and stuff like that. It's over the top. But the thing is, when I'm listening to him calling a match, even though he's Zoo Crew and I loathe the Zoo Crew delivery method, he's talking about what's happening in the ring. He's talking about it with excitement. I actually find myself getting excited about a match while he's freaking out about a match because he sounds like a fan of what's going on, and his delivery sounds like a fan of what's going on. So while it can be a little annoying and it can be a little over the top, and I understand why that's not everyone's thing, it is so fucking horrible. Otunga is so horrible by comparison. I mean, and these are the quote unquote announce teams that are competing against one another. But David Otunga's on Raw, and he's with two experienced guys in Michael Cole and JBL, even though Michael Cole still doesn't know the difference between a head scissor and a hurricanrana. But JBL has that boisterous, over-the-top heel thing going, kind of like just Ventura back in the day, except, less intelligent. And then you've got this quiet intellectual face gimmick of David Otunga, which, of course, if you're a quiet intellectual face and you're on play-by-play where it's your job to tell people what's happening in the ring, it's an audio format for the most part. They do cut to the announce team every now and then, but it's primarily an audio format, and he does not have any delivery whatsoever. So but let's get to the actual SummerSlam itself. I gave the whole of SummerSlam, including the pre-show, 3 out of 5. The pre-show definitely pulled the score up. I will say that. I knew that it was going to be interesting when I was reading about it. The Usos and American Alpha and Hype Bros versus Breezango, Ascension, and Vaudevillains. And again, I want to hate the Hype Bros so much. It's a terrible name. It's a stupid gimmick. I hate Mojo Rawley. He goes running around like the Ultimate Warrior. It's the worst parts of Ultimate Warrior are what they basically gave to Mojo Rawley to do. And it's just, but he's got this, when you see somebody that's like a lovable retard and you see like their facial expression and they're so happy and you know that they're about to smear the cupcake on their face, but you're just like, oh, he's happy, just leave him alone. That's kind of how I feel about Mojo Rawley. And yet when I'm watching him actually wrestle and perform, he's fantastic. I forget all about how much I hate him. It's traumatizing to say the least. And the Usos have been there forever, so you just sort of assumed that it was going to be a good match. The thing that annoyed me about the whole premise of the match was that the whole premise of the match was essentially to take 12 guys that WWE has no fucking idea what to do with and put them in a match together and let them figure out how to make it entertaining. Had this match happened on a house show, I would have been wrist-slittingly depressed because it was actually really good. These guys, it seemed to me, and maybe I'm reaching, I don't know, but it seemed to me like they actually tried to make it an entertaining match and got to everyone's high spots in due course. They didn't try to slam it all into like a 5-minute spot fest. It was spread out over the whole match, and it was fantastic. I mean, Mojo Rawley sold his ass off during the whole match. You expect Zack Ryder to sell because Zack Ryder sells for everybody. He's just one of those guys. That's not a cut up, by the way. That's a fucking compliment. That's his job, is to sell for people. And other people should be selling for him. Breezango, ridiculously over the top. The Ascension, again, one of those cartoon character 1980s wrestling tag teams. The Vaudevillains are like a throwback, and the Usos are the Usos. I mean, their gimmick is designed for kids, and it's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. And of course, American Alpha is like a throwback for people that like both tandem wrestling and traditional wrestling with a little bit of flippy dippy shit in there. So you have these guys in there now. The standout teams, of course, I'm American Alpha, the Ascension, Breezango, and the Usos. And the reason why is because the teams themselves, the men on the teams, have chemistry and they have tandem movesets. And I can't tell you how much I enjoy that. The Hype Bros are going to get to that point, I'm sure, as long as the WWE keeps them together, or as long as I don't want Zack Ryder to be one of those guys that causes drama backstage and politics his way out of something like that. I know that he wasn't exactly excited about this whole tag team thing, but it's rejuvenated his career in a way, and I kind of want him to stick around in there a little bit. But again, like, the finish for that match was brilliant. It builds the entire tag team division. It built all 6 teams, and it put everyone over. And then the Usos stealing the pin or whatever puts over a further program between them and everyone else, but especially American Alpha. So for the sake that it shouldn't have been good, for the sake that it had no build, it had no promo, it had nothing leading up to it, and yet 12 guys got in the ring, put each other over like shit, like awesome, and came out of there with an actual story being told during the match, at the end of the match, post-match. I gave it 4 out of 5. I was blown away by what they did. And I don't, like, you know what? I don't care that it was on the free pre-show. I give Match of the Night honors to this because it was fucking amazing. I mean, listen, there are other matches that were good, and they were definitely, on that par of being, great. They were on that cusp of being great matches, but this was just a great, great match. Zayn and Neville versus the Dudley Boys, and it's I'm glad that it's changed a little bit leading into Raw, that Zayn and Neville were just sort of thrown together in a match of the Dudley Boys, and it didn't, again, no build, nobody gives a shit, but again, it's on the pre-show, so who cares? It's booked like an indie match, whatever. The standout for this match, though, was the referee. He was absolute gold. He was as invisible as a ref is supposed to be, and yet every time it was time for him to put the faces back in the corner, or missing blind tags, or having a slow count or a fast count, or whatever the fuck was going on, he was just stereotypically referee blind. My only criticism of that ref is that if it was going to be a false finish, if it was going to be one of those close counts, and he was counting his twos, he'd goes one, he goes two, and then he'd already be getting up after two to start the more action. And then when he'd go down for his three and he wouldn't hit his three, he was already on his feet. Like he's bent over, sure, but he was already on his feet ready to go on to the next thing. So it kind of gave it away that it was a near fall. But other than that, another great match. I gave it 3 out of 5. I enjoy the Dudley Boys. I know not everyone likes the tables and testify and all that shit, but I really enjoyed what they did. And the fact that the Dudley Boys and they've retired, I guess, at this point, but the fact that they are still at this point in their careers, still putting young guys over, even guys as talented as Zayn and Neville are, is speaks to the professionalism that goes on. Anyways, after that was the first out of 7 match between Sheamus and Cesaro, which I thought was really amazing. And again, it finished off the quote unquote pre-show before more yattering by the ridiculous panel again. But it was really a good match. There were some spots that were kind of repetitive, like they went back and did a couple things. There are spots that you kind of expect to be repetitive, where Cesaro goes for the airplane spin and doesn't get it or whatever. But there was a few spots there where like both Sheamus and Cesaro were guilty of going back to the well too many times for the same move that they'd done once or twice already. So it didn't take away from the match. It was just kind of annoying. What ruined the match for me was that there was a really great match and great story going on in the ring that required no commentary. So really only a functional retard would fuck up the commentary on this match. But guess what? It was Cole, Otunga, and JBL. So of course they fucked it up. And they fucked it up really badly, because what could have been awesome selling, this is the first of a best of 7, just became repetitive. Well, this is the first of the best of 7. It wasn't, they could have built it so much better than they did, but all they basically did was repeat the same 2 catchphrases. This is the first of a best of 7, and Cesaro's the Swiss Superman. That's it. They just kept building that shit over and over and over again. So, I don't know. It was... The commentary literally pulled the grade of the match down and that's why it got 3.5 out of 5 instead of the 4 out of 5 that it deserved, because the commentary was so horrible that you shouldn't have to mute. It's a lot like when you're watching football, or if you're watching baseball, or if you're watching hockey. You shouldn't have to mute the commentary to enjoy what's happening. And in this case, you would have been better served to literally take the entire announce team, have them on a separate track, have them on the Spanish channel, like have them on the Spanish audio channel, so that you can turn off the 3 functional retards so that you could actually enjoy the story that was happening in the ring. Because without those morons fucking it up, Sheamus and Cesaro were telling a fantastic story in the ring, having a really good match. And it was just those idiots with their terrible commentary and terrible analysis going on. And JBL yelling over, like, Otunga never once raised his voice over practically a whisper. And every time Michael Cole would throw to him, JBL would yell over him, which I guess you could sit there and argue for a split second. You could sit there and argue with a straight face that that's his job as the heel announcer and he talks over everybody. But that's not the job of a heel announcer. The job of a heel announcer is not to talk over all the other announcers. Jesse Ventura didn't do it. Randy Savage didn't do it. Bobby the Brain Heenan didn't do it. You don't need to yell over the other announcers to be the heel announcer. You don't have to bully the other 2 announcers to somehow be a bad guy who's doing announcing. I'm JBL and I'm a bad guy. I'm going to talk over you, and that's how I'm going to get over as a heel announcer. It's fucking horrible, and it's a fucking sacrilege, and that really is what it boils down to, because he's trying to do the easy way. He's trying to be a bully, and I thought the WWE was against bullies. I seem to recall over and over and over again how the WWE releases these anti-bullying campaigns, and then they employ someone who sits there bullying the other announcers all the time. And he does the cowardly heel part good. And it's probably because he's lost so much weight since he actually wrestled. So he understands that if he actually got in the face of a wrestler and they actually wanted to kick the shit out of him for being a dick, that they could. But the play-by-play for this became so horrible that it made the match unwatchable, which is a fucking sacrilege, because I know a lot of people don't like Sheamus, but I like Sheamus. I think he's a great wrestler, and everyone is big on Cesaro. So the fact that the match was, great, and then it was good on the cusp of great, and yet the announcing just dragged it down into the shit. Just, oh, this is a great match. Let me ruin it by yelling over everybody. It'll be fantastic. It was horrible. Now, the first match of the actual SummerSlam pay-per-view was Jericho versus Enzo and Cass. Of course, Enzo and Cass come out, and they have a hilarious pre-match promo. Now, the match itself, there was a few botches and a few miscues, but when you've got four guys that have really not wrestled together very much, you can expect that. Overall, though, I thought it was a really solid match, very entertaining. The thing that stood out to me in this match was Owens trash talking during pretty much the entire match. I mean, there was a point during the match when he yelled at Jericho and he goes, "Don't tag in the big guy. He hits too hard." That kind of stuff is fucking gold. And listen, they've got the mics on at ringside so sensitive that they can catch the guys calling out spots to each other if you're paying attention close enough. So the fact that Owens understands that enough to then trash talk and be a smartass is great. I mean, that's the kind of stuff you want to have more of, since this isn't the 80s anymore. The ring, everyone understands the ring and the ring area is mic'd up. So let's have some fun with the fact that it's mic'd up. Like, don't let the fans take control of it. Have some fun and start trash talking or saying shit. And Jericho does it to a certain extent as well. And I'd like to see more guys doing it, more girls doing it, because it's funny as hell. And they should be taking advantage of it because it helps in telling the story. If you go to an indie show, you will get that as part of the indie show. You'll have indie guys talking shit to the fans, talking shit to their opponents, talking shit to the ref. And you can hear it at an indie show, but at a WWE event with, tens of thousands of people in the audience, it's a little more difficult for that to happen. And since they have the ring and the ring area so mic'd up, they don't have to be limited in what they're going to do for telling their story in the ring. They can bring some of this shit from the indies back in. And listen, all of these guys spent some time in the indies / territories with Jericho. And I don't see why not. Why can't you have more fun like that? And they really should, because, it adds to the match. Now, Charlotte versus Sasha Banks for the women's title. I don't know if this is part of Charlotte's gimmick or not. It's something I've long complained about in Charlotte, is that she is far too stiff. And she is fucking strong. I mean, there's a reason why they're using her on those tap outs promos. She is ridiculously strong, ridiculously flexible, amazingly agile. She's okay on the microphone. But the problem with this match was that it was cringeworthy to watch it. And it wasn't cringeworthy as in, oh God, she can't wrestle. It was cringeworthy as in she kept it, and I could be wrong, and it would not be the first time, but it just seemed like the entire match was Charlotte trying to accidentally on purpose hurt Sasha. I mean, it was botchistically bad. Charlotte is able to do quite a lot of moves, and she's able to do them without hurting other people because she's so freakishly strong. The fact that she had Sasha in the corner and dropped her down that fucking hard right on her back, and Sasha selling from that point forward was not a fucking work. She was fucking hurt. And there were Twitter and Instagram images all night long that a bunch of different fans were posting. Sasha getting treated, with the cupping that Phelps was so famous, he's made famous from the Olympics, trying to take the pressure off of her back and giving her acupuncture and then putting her in an ice bath so that she didn't have and a legitimate muscle damage to her lower back, because that was the only lower back move. So again, if you want to make the argument that Charlotte's point was that she was trying to work the lower back for the figure eight, you would be, I guess, correct if the figure eight was not targeted to the legs instead of the lower back. And I noticed a lot of fans on there being smarky saying, well, it's for the lower back. But the figure eight is not about the lower back. It's about the legs first. The lower back does get hurt, but that's not the primary target. The primary target's supposed to be the legs. You're supposed to be tweaking the knee, and doing the figure eight is supposed to extra tweak the knee. It has nothing to do with the lower back. And it was the only move that Charlotte did in the entire match that aggressively targeted Sasha's already damaged lower back. And we already know that it was damaged previously from another match that she had, again, with Charlotte in a tag team. So again, this is where it comes back to me saying that there's two problems here with the quote unquote Divas Revolution. First of all, the first problem with the Divas Revolution is because it's being called the Divas Revolution by the WWE and by Stephanie McMahon. Now, what the promo that led to this Divas Revolution, and it was featured in their documentary that they had about the Divas Revolution, was that Stephanie gave this speech to all the women wrestlers saying that you are no longer divas, you're women's wrestlers, except that everybody in the WWE that cut promos and all the fans continue to call it a Divas Revolution. Even though they're no longer called divas, they're called women wrestlers. So when you tell everybody and you release a documentary that you produced, and you show how you're telling all these women wrestlers they're no longer divas, they're no longer there for bra and panties matches, they're no longer there for this, that, and the other, and yet you call it a Divas Revolution, you're talking out the side of your ass. And this is more of that bullshit that I see happening in the women's division. And it fucking sucks, because don't get me wrong, the guys do this bullshit to each other too. But it just seems like in the women's division, it's coming down to this thing where it's still, it might be called the Divas Revolution, but it's still women trying to out-cunt each other. And what I saw happen during that match was so cringeworthy. I can only say that Charlotte was being a gigantic cunt to Sasha Banks. I don't care that she was supposed to go away with the title. That doesn't bother me. That's just part of the story. I give a shit about that. What I don't want to see in wrestling is people going out of their way to accidentally hurt somebody. It's one thing if, Seth Rollins has the buckle bomb. We'll talk about that later in the show. But Seth Rollins has the buckle bomb, which can go wrong and does go wrong. But it's one of his signature moves. And even though it can go wrong, it's a lot like when Eddie's got his frog splash. A lot of the times, Eddie would hurt himself, or Eddie would hurt a guy that he was in the ring with. Or Chris... I know Chris Benoit doesn't exist anymore, but follow me for just a second. But when Chris Benoit would do his headbutt, sometimes he would miss and he'd actually headbutt the side of the guy's head. So moves can go wrong. They're not intended to go wrong, but they can go wrong. The sharpshooter and the scorpion deathlock, basically the same move. Just accept that it's the fucking same move. Now, both of those moves can have extra torque put on them, like a Boston Crab, and it can legitimately hurt a person, especially if that person's not relaxing when it's happening to them. If they're tensing up, it's going to hurt even more. But what I saw Charlotte do to Sasha in the corner there, I can only call a blatant cunt move. And I'm glad. Listen, Sasha's hurt. You can tell that Sasha's hurt. You can see a hitch in the giddy up, and that sucks because Sasha Banks is a fantastic wrestler and she works her ass off, and Charlotte's a good wrestler and she works her ass off. So when you've got two quote unquote women's wrestlers, aka divas in the Revolution, that are at the top like that, and one of them is actively trying to hurt the other one accidentally on purpose, it really pisses me off and it makes me sour on one of them. And I wasn't a huge Charlotte fan in the first place. I'm a little nepotism's in place, but it makes me kind of hate her, and I don't want to hate her. I like Ric Flair, but when you see shit like that going down, even if you're a fan and you're watching it going on, you're supposed to be mad at Charlotte, and that's fine. But when you understand that it's basically a choreographed play where the athletes are incredibly strong and athletic, you start to sort of sit there and wonder, is this one of those accidentally on purpose things, because Randy Orton's been hurt accidentally on purpose. Batista's been hurt. The list goes on and on. Macho Man accidentally got hurt on purpose a couple times by Hogan. It happens all the fucking time. And it's part of wrestling. It's as old as the carny is itself. But in this day and age, there should be people in place that are, and this is really on the bookers, and it's really on the people working in Gorilla to make sure that these wrestlers aren't doing this bullshit anymore, because it's fucking bullshit. Miz versus Apollo Crews was actually surprisingly good. Miz and Daniel Bryan had a little lovers quarrel this week, which I'll play a little bit later, but actually a pretty decent match. I was expecting shenanigans, and it was a clean match. I thought it was really good. Miz versus Apollo Crews. I think I'd give what did I give it here? Yeah, I gave it a 3 out of 5 as well. Styles versus Cena, longest match of the night, and did not feel like it. And I don't say that as an insult. That should be seen as a compliment, because when matches are long, and this one was 21 something and change, when a match is that long, it can get boring, because listen, Cena gets shit on a lot for having his 5 moves or whatever, but it was as much Cena as it was Styles, making it entertaining for that whole 21 minutes. During the legitimate SummerSlam card, it was one of the best matches. I'm not going to say it was match of the night. It was definitely really good. But it was, I don't know. I don't think there was anything missing. I think Cena did, what Cena's going to do, but it was this weird thing where Cena left his little armband in the ring or whatever, and that's supposed to be some sort of symbol that he's, I don't know, moving on or something. I don't fucking know, because the symbolism for moving on as a wrestler and retiring is leaving your boots in the ring. But I don't know. Well, I guess we'll see what happens as it goes forward. But as far as an end to the whatever program, it served its purpose. It was good. Gallows and Anderson go over on New Day, win the titles, champs, whatever. My only complaint with this one is that they had to take Big E out of the equation to make it to make it that anyone could beat the New Day. And that's good, I guess, in the way that the New Day do their thing as like a Freebirds rule thing. But I think that it's sort of, without intending to, it makes Gallows and Anderson look weaker, because the only way they can beat the New Day is if they're a man down. And I get that it's 3 versus 2 and whatever, but they really should have been able to go over clean. And maybe if the New Day were going to have somebody out of the ringside area for having to finally lose the titles, it would be nice if it happened like this. But I don't know, it'd be good. Now, they didn't. I guess they, it's weird because I don't know. The match had a very weird feel to it. And when I say it had a very weird feel to it, it was because Big E wasn't there, it became this weird, okay, well, we suck and we're not doing this and we're not doing that. And the reason why we lost is because Big E wasn't here or whatever. They're legitimate, should be new champs and shit. Just because it'd be more interesting that way, I think. But it just wasn't, and that's just sort of the way it goes sometimes. And it is what it is. I think they get their little win or whatever, and it keeps everything going forward, and that's great. But like the New Day get to keep the straps, even though technically speaking, Gallows and Anderson win, I guess is what you can call it. I don't know. It's very weird, and that was the problem, is that it was a very weird match from start to finish. So, it's just, I don't know. It was very odd and very fucked up, I guess, for lack of a better term. So after that, you got Ambrose versus Ziggler. And this is where, a lot of the internet wrestling community kind of have started taking a shit on Ambrose. I guess the honeymoon's over, or something. Ambrose does what Ambrose has to do to be in matches with these guys. And I'm sorry, but the WWE is not a place where you break out light tubes filled with baby powder, and it's not a place where you bring chairs with barbed wire wrapped around them. It's gonna be different than Ambrose in the Indies. It's just gonna be. Still, with the build that was happening here, I was expecting Ambrose versus Ziggler to be more. It was very, I don't know, it was stiff, but it was just not the barn burn. I was expecting this one to steal the show and be match of the night, but I don't know. It was just very, just kind of there, you know. Now contrasting this, and as painful as this is to say, because Nikki Bella was the one that made her return. Now here, okay, so Eva Marie's on suspension, and they had the announcer guy that does the Eva Marie introductions basically cut a promo for her for not being there. And she's not there for Adderall, but whatever. They could have easily done this post SummerSlam, but I mean, as it turns out, Nikki Bella comes back, so it's probably the best time to do this. That all happening was nothing really a big deal. Her being bad with Natalya and Alexa Bliss and going over on Becky Lynch and Naomi and Carmella was fine. That's sort of what you expect. There's a few botches that happened in the match, nothing really alarming or anything like that. Naomi, Carmella, and Alexa Bliss were standout performers in my mind. Natalya and Nikki were the vets who had very good matches and helped everyone get to their spots, and Becky was really good. She just needs more one-on-one matches. Jesus Christ, to shine, because what happens is she's kind of lost in the shuffle. Despite having this orange hair and despite having, the fifth iteration of her ring attire, she's really lost in the women's division. Like, there's not really anything for her to do. And then when you put her in a match, she loses cleanly, and it's she looks like oh, okay, no, you were the better woman tonight kind of thing. Whereas it'd be probably better if she loses to heels and is upset because she got screwed out of a win or something. It'd be a little more entertaining. They did that with her for a little bit, and then they just sort of stopped. But when you have this many people in a match, it's really tough to make any one person look good. And this sort of ended up being the case here, is that all 6 women were great in the match. I gave it 3.5 out of 5 because of all the story that was told for all these women. But what ends up happening is someone invariably gets lost in the shuffle, and Carmella got shat on online. I have no idea why. She was fantastic. Maybe it's that she comes to the ring in like Lululemon attire. I don't know. I don't understand why people took a shit on her so bad. Is it because she's got small tits and a small butt? Like, I don't quite understand what the problem is with her. She looks good. She wrestles really well. She's got an attitude. She works the mic like a champ. Alexa Bliss doesn't have any bigger endowments. I don't understand why she gets a pass and this broad gets just shat on. It's ridiculous. But she got shat on really bad online. I'm not quite sure why. Naomi, understandably, was excellent. She had a very good match and a very good night. That, I don't know, I guess it could have been a hell of a lot worse. But what actually did it for me was how many different little stories they started within this match. There's legitimately stories that are started between multiple performers in this match that any one of them creative could go ahead and spin their wheels with for the next month or two. Are they going to? Probably not, because let's keep in mind this is still the Divas, and they're not really being treated like women's wrestlers and really given the people that they need to have. Now, I still think it was an excellent match. I think that the wrestling was fantastic. And look at this. We all got the gift of having 6 actual women wrestling, not 5 women wrestlers and a pinup model with big tits in the ring, just distracting everyone from doing their spots and creating chaos. All right. The next match was Rusev and Reigns. There was a no contest because Reigns, in his tweener gimmick, has come along and attacked Rusev. This was followed by a beatdown in the ring, and a lot of the wrestlers seems were shitting on the results because they were expecting this to sort of be the end, not just a hiccup in the continuing story. I really don't have a problem with this continuing to be a story. I mean, for all the shit that people give Reigns, in this, he's actually starting to have what I could arguably call a personality. And I get that it's not a face personality and it's not a heel personality. It's just sort of a, I'm going to shit disturb personality, a lot like The Rock did for a while, even though Reigns clearly does not have the charisma that The Rock has. It's still nice to see him doing something where he's not being a detriment to the storyline. It's been decent watching the storyline, and because he's all alone in the storyline and Rusev's got a partner, it actually, by hook or by crook, it makes him look a little stronger. So that's good. Now the match that everyone's been talking about, I guess it's not really the match that everyone's been talking about because the match is pretty horrific. It was I shouldn't say it's horrific because Orton actually, like Lesnar actually did sell a lot during this match. I was actually pleasantly surprised with how much selling Lesnar did. It's more than I've seen him sell in years. I don't think I saw him sell this much with Undertaker. It's just, I know why people shat on this, and it's the hard way elbow. And I understand why people shat on it because I shit on it because of that. Now, the thing is, the WWE has moved away from having blood. And they've done that by design for so long that it's sort of become a joke. Now, the very next day, or was it even that night, it was announced that Lesnar was fined by Stephanie McMahon for making Randy Orton bleed. So it was some sort of excessive violence or some ridiculous thing like that. But they turned it into a bit of a kayfabe piece, and he got a fine. And Brock Lesnar, who is on a part-time contract making more money than anyone else in the company, got a fine for $500. Which one would think he spends more than that on his goofy tagged up trunks. But anyways, it's still not in keeping with what WWE has done in the past that comes out. Now, the first time, I shouldn't say the first time, but one of the more famous times the WWE's No Blood Edict came into effect was after Backlash 2006. The Kentucky State Athletic Board fined the WWE $900 for multiple violations. The most grievous of these was Shawn Michaels and God versus Vince and Shane McMahon, in which Michaels bladed himself pretty deeply and was really bleeding all over the fucking place. Now, Shawn Michaels wasn't issued a fine. Neither were Vince or Shane issued a fine. It was just the Kentucky State Athletic Board fined the WWE $900. Since then, though, I have a list. I have spent some time online. Don't worry, I fact-checked it. Chill out. Looking back at some of the more famous times that the WWE has issued a fine for excessive blood. In 2008, the WWE issued Batista a fine for $100,000 and Jericho, his opponent for that night, $5,000, which Batista then paid, by the way, for doing a blood spot in a cage match, which had apparently been greenlit by the bookers, who were allegedly Pat Patterson and Arn Anderson. So Batista paid $105,000 for something that had apparently been greenlit. And what it basically came from was Batista was getting out of the cage, Jericho was already out of the cage, and slammed the door to Batista's head, and that's where the blood came from. Now, the blood didn't come from that actual impact. He was bladed himself inside the ring, and that's where the blood came from, which is the reason why the fine was, quote-unquote, so high. In 2011, Undertaker and Hunter Hearst Helmsley, or Triple H, whatever the fuck you want to call them, were fined a rumored $25,000 each for a chair shot hard way that led to The Undertaker getting color. CM Punk was fined $500,000 for blading himself later that year in a cage match with Jerry Lawler. $500,000. Holy fuck. Orton and Daniel Bryan were allegedly fined $50,000 each in 2013 for getting excessive violence during the street fight match on Raw. There's also not exactly a widely publicized standing fine, but I did find multiple sources for it, so it is a legit thing. There is a standing fine by the WWE of $3,000 for any wrestler who bleeds on the mat. So if you blade yourself and you bleed on the mat, it's going to cost you $3,000. Now, that is hefty, but it's supposed to say that the WWE is serious that they don't want blood. Now, these fines, just like the wellness policy we've been discussing before, aren't always issued. And when blood is accidental, such as the cage match between Lesnar and Taker in October 2015, gets deemed an accident. Now, I'm not quite sure how 15 chair shots to the head is accidentally blood, but no fines were issued in that case. And there are other cases, other examples of times when the WWE hasn't issued fines. Now, in this case, the WWE, or Orton and Lesnar, were greenlit to get blood. And the blood that they were supposed to get was supposed to be a grazing elbow by Brock Lesnar. And whether it was grazing or whether it was full contact is arguable, whatever. But what legitimately happened was Brock Lesnar came in just over the top of the crown. Now, right up here, hold on, I'm gonna get off of this one so that you can see me a little closer. Right up here is the crown of your head. Right near the hairline. This is where most guys blade. Some guys will blade up into the hairline because the blades, you'll see, if you ever see Ric Flair do this, you'll see just how many blade wounds he has. Harley Race has them too. So does Jimmy Superfly Snuka. Now, most wrestlers, when they blade, they'll blade up in the hairline up here so that it bleeds down their face. They've tried cutting up here on your head, right there. Jesus Christ, it's hard to see it. But right here is just the other side of the crown of your forehead. This part of your forehead is the hardest part of your skull. It's thicker bone than the rest of your skull is. Now, if you blade up near here, you're going to bleed like a stuck pig, but you'll probably be okay unless you're got bladed by somebody else who was a dickhead and decided to cut you from one end to the other. Yeah, I'm looking at you, New Jack. Now, what some guys will do if they really want color, and Ric Flair does it now, post everyone's seen the scars on his head, but when Ric Flair would get color afterwards, he'd get color right here because he was turning his white hair red, right? Now, the idea was that this part of your head, this part of your skull, is more prone to bleeding. And if you ever do this with the skin that's on your skull, you'll see that it moves around a lot more than the stuff right up here does. Now, that was the idea, was that they were going to have Lesnar give Randy Orton an elbow right up here, and that was going to bleed like a stuck pig, and it was going to bleed everywhere. And the idea was that it was going to cut open and it was just going to drip. What ended up happening, though, is that it was supposed to be a grazing elbow, allegedly, it was supposed to be a grazing elbow, ended up being a full contact elbow, and you could see they showed it on, they even zoomed in on it, which is what baffles me about the WWE's no blood policy. They zoomed in on the fucking laceration, and it was a jagged laceration too. You could tell it was a hard one. You could tell it wasn't a blading. And it was just pool of blood dripping. Now, this is where a lot of internet smarks and other people in the industry started getting into a bit of a fight, was because this happened hard way. It wasn't actually supposed to be that much blood. It was supposed to be a grazing hit that wouldn't bleed quite that badly, but you can't plan how badly the head's going to bleed. It's just going to fucking bleed. So what ends up happening is that there's a pool of blood underneath Randy Orton's head, like a pool of blood underneath Randy Orton's head. And that was the look that you saw momentarily on Brock Lesnar's face, when he kind of just eyes wide with Paul Heyman, which again, for all of my critiques of Paul Heyman, he's actually a very decent wrestling actor. And he looked shocked when Undertaker's streak was over, right? We all know how shocked he looked when Undertaker's streak was over. That black guy that was like all over fucking social media, Paul Heyman was just as wide-eyed and wide-mouthed at the fucking streak ending. So we know, and we all know that he was in on it. So we all know that Paul Heyman is good at acting. We also all know that Brock Lesnar is not. And so for the briefest of moments when he kind of just went, oops, like he had that look on his face, oh shit, you could tell that it had gone a little farther than they'd intended. And they called it a defeat because Randy Orton could no longer continue. So it was kind of like a TKO, they basically called it. I guess I would call it a KO, but it's funny because on the WWE website it says TKO, but a technical knockout is after you knock a guy down 3 times. It's not after you knock his ass out. But anyways, they called it a technical knockout, and away he goes. Now, it was just, I don't know. It was very, very weird, and it was very odd, and it leads to the championship match, which was, of course, Finn Balor going over on Seth Rollins. Now, this was a fantastic match. Don't get me wrong. Really great. Since the match happened, Seth has been berated by numerous wrestlers. The most verbose of which were Bret Hart on his podcast and Lance Storm talking to Bryan Alvarez. Now, just before we get into this, allegedly the shoulder had been bothering him for a few weeks. They assumed that it was ACL. They assumed that it was rotator cuff damage. They've been icing it. I'm holding on to the wrong shoulder. They've been icing it and they've been taking care of it, and he had been working out with it as much as he normally would. It was a known issue. When he took the buckle bomb on the barricade, the word is at ringside you could hear something pop. And so the first thing people were worried about was that it had been that the rotator cuff had been permanently damaged. Luckily, that wasn't the case. And he underwent surgery on Wednesday, posting pictures to Twitter and stuff to show that he was in good spirits and everything. So that part is done. He relinquishes his title on Raw the next night. That's all done. Okay, let's move on from there, because let's be realistic. Finn Balor will definitely be back, and he'll definitely be back at the top at some point when he's feeling healthier. Now, Bret Hart criticized the buckle bomb on his podcast, saying that his problem with it is that the move has a very small margin of error, and that more often than not, the other wrestler is left too disoriented to properly either sell the next move or they get hurt. Now, that's sort of true. Now, you got to remember a couple things. The buckle bomb normally gets done on the turnbuckle, which is a pillow. They call it a pillow for a reason. It does not hurt as much as they sell it to hurt, okay? So when you do that buckle bomb, though, on the barricade, that is also padded, but it's padded with crash mat, which is a little harder and more dense than the turnbuckle. So Bret Hart and also Lance Storm criticized it, saying that it's too easy to hurt somebody with it. And that is true. However, Finn Balor has a very stiff wrestling style that he adopted in Japan. Bret Hart, Lance Storm, both also have spent time in Japan, and I'm pretty sure that they can remember just how stiff it was over there, and both of them spent a legitimate amount of time over there. So Finn Balor is not a pussy and understands this is a stiff move. This is a move with a small margin of error, and it's up to the person getting the move put on him to make sure that they spread their arms and catch those ropes to spread out the impact. Everyone gets that. And he did that on the barricade. You can see him spreading his arms out to take the impact. It just happened that this arm folded in somehow, and he took the brunt of it right on the back of the shoulder. Is it a dangerous move? I don't really see it as being one. I've seen so many guys do the snake eyes. I've seen so many wrestlers do the versions of the buckle bomb where it's a little higher up, like in the middle of the back. And these guys don't, like the guys that they're doing it to, don't get hurt that often. Is there a small margin of error? Well, sure, but there's a small margin of error with, there's a small margin of error with the sharpshooter. If you lose your footing at any point and start falling backwards, you can do some serious damage to the guy's knees or back. There's every move in wrestling has a margin of error that can legitimately lead to somebody getting hurt. Now, Cena was apparently injured in a match with Seth Rollins where he took a high knee to the nose. And it seems like ever since then, Bret Hart's kind of had a hard-on for Seth Rollins, and I guess he must not like him or something. I don't understand what it is, but every time Seth gets into something where the other guy gets hurt, Bret Hart goes on his podcast and cuts a promo on him. When Lesnar does it legitimately to other people, he doesn't seem to say shit about it. But anyways, the buckle bomb does make me cringe as a move, and it should. It's a lot like when someone does a pile driver. It's a dangerous move to see these guys do, and it's legitimately scary to watch it happen. And because I know just how easily it can go all awry, and in this case, it did, and that's just sort of unfortunately what ended up happening. Now, before I wrap up this week, the last thing I want to talk about, because I guess it's direct fallout from SummerSlam. And this was on SmackDown. There was an altercation between Daniel Bryan and The Miz, and The Miz cut a promo on Daniel Bryan. Now, since then, it's been, I don't know, suggested that this might have been a work. If this is a work, this is the best acting I've ever seen Miz do, and I've seen him in movies. I think this was a legit blowout. I think this was a legit shoot. And I think that what's happening now is that the WWE's saying or releasing or leaking that it was a shoot so they can turn it into a bit of a gimmick. And that's good. That's fine. That just means good news for us. Turning shoots into gimmicks is what wrestling is supposed to be doing. That's their job. Now, this is basically Daniel Bryan and The Miz with their first little squabble. The video here that you're going to see off. There we go. To that side is going to be just the first couple seconds. Property of WWE, all that bullshit. Off you go.
There's no gentle way to say it. To me, you wrestle like a coward. You wrestle like somebody who's afraid to get hit. Like,
I wrestle like a coward.
You wrestle like a coward.
I'm the one?
If I were to create a wrestler who, to me, like embodies, like when I was an independent guy and I was thinking like, oh, okay, what's the soft WWE style? It would be that. WWE is transformed in the last...
Hold on.
All right. So here's where I think it was I think it was 100% shoot. And the reason I'm going to say that and go out on a limb is saying that is because if you look at Renee Young reacting to this, she is also not a great actor, gorgeous and fantastic at doing her job, but not a great actor. And her reaction to it was great. It was kind of like, is this a shoot? Is this for real? That was a pretty ballsy thing to say to some other wrestler that's actually still actively wrestling. But what sold it for me is Maurice. Because if you look at Maurice right next to The Miz, you can see she's looking around thinking, is this for real? You could see her looking she saw her looking at Renee briefly, but you saw her more looking at the production staff around the set and looking to see, is this a work? Should I be concerned? Should I whatever? And you can see after The Miz blows up at Daniel Bryan, after he just blows his top, the camera comes back to where The Miz was, and Maurice is nowhere to be found. And the only reason that would happen is if the production staff, or the people that were sitting there, were just calling her off. They zoomed in on The Miz and Daniel Bryan. They called her the fuck out of there because she was directly in the line of fire. If things went down, she would conceivably get hurt. Now, I'm gonna queue up here. I want to go back to where Renee.
That's not what this show's about.
The GM have this. Thank you very much, Renee. This is a great show, but we're talking here.
And like Renee basically comes out and says this is not what show is about. And that to me was just gold, because it sort of told you that what you were watching was really happening. And listen, now they can say, oh, it was a shoot and, it's all been planned, whatever. But this is how wrestling is supposed to happen. When they have things like this, real things happen. The job of wrestling is to take the real shit that just happened and turn it into a shoot somehow. And that's great. That's a good thing for them to do. But here's the most telling part of it for me is Renee's afterwards, her reaction to the whole thing was she's just kind of got her hands back. I don't want to be hit. I don't want to be in the middle of this fire. Daniel Bryan walks away. If this was legitimately a shoot, he would have stayed in there, continued on with the berating, continued on with, the word war back and forth, and it would have been fantastic. But that being said, that's it for me this week. My take on the Daniel Bryan Miz shoot or work. Absolutely a shoot. Absolutely, WWE is doing the right thing by trying to turn it into a work, trying to kayfabe the shit out of it. That's their job. That's great. They should continue doing that. It also gives them a chance to basically fuck with the fans a little bit. And listen, they love doing that too. So that's it for me this week. See you guys next week. I'm out of here.
Well, that was an abortion of a show. Should the mood take you, check out markoutradio.com and leave a comment. You can also find links there to our Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and Stitcher channels. You can even leave a voicemail on our Skype. Just click the links and share them.